Today, we're going to talk about why, as a marketer, you should care about your caller experience, because isn't caller experience an IT issue? Well, we'll talk about that. So, what is caller experience marketing? Well, simply put, it's efforts that are taken to make sure that your calls are on brand and positive, and that you're taking opportunities with every call to either convert, retain, or increase wallet share. And again, what we're going to do today is talk from a very high level about why that matters here in 2025, and certainly from a sort of high level, what you can do as a marketer when you go back to your organization to take a look at what your caller experience is and how to improve it. CMOs and organizations as a whole are very focused on the customer experience right now. In fact, PricewaterhouseCoopers did a recent survey, pretty robust, of CMOs. This was from October of 2024. And the top 3 shared interests from those CMOs are on the screen right now. And you can see number 2, even just a little bit above AI integration, is focusing on customer experience. Now, how do we make that jibe, that fact that CMOs are really interested in customer experience, with some of the conversations we've been having as on-hold marketing or caller experience marketing providers, where organizations seem to not be paying as much attention to that today? And what we think's happening, and certainly what we've seen, is that while there's a focus on customer experience, there's a disconnect between customer service on the phone and customer experience. And why is that? Well, a lot of your operations people and maybe your small business owners are hearing every day from folks that are telling them, hey, we can really save money, help you cut costs by going wholly self-service for customer service, having automated things where you don't have to keep as much staff. And that's really attractive from a cost savings point. And hey, everybody's uses the internet, everybody uses self-service, that's what people are comfortable with, right? And what happens is they're either unintentionally neglecting the phone or, in some cases, purposefully trying to steer people completely away from calling. I'll tell you a quick story. It's always fun to talk about wins, but I got a story about a loss. In the last 12 months, we were talking with an NBA team, and part of their crew in the kind of a fan experience department realized we really need to improve what's happening on the phones. So we were excited. It's always exciting to work with a professional sports team. We went through a number of rounds of discovery. We're building out solutions. And then we got to a point where we hit someone in the C-level that said, wait a minute, guys, wait a minute. We're investing tons of money into making self-service options so that we don't have to staff call centers. We're not going to put any resources into this, and died on the vine. That was painful, and that's what we're running into. So how, as marketers, can we kind of combat that? And quite frankly, let me ask you this. Should we? Does it matter if people really are comfortable with those self-service options? Well, here's a couple of stats that make that argument. 79% of people here in the United States have said, I've used self-service or a support portal of some kind in the last year, and 60% say they actually prefer them. So there's definitely a place for these self-service portals that don't require you to call in. However, what we see happening is there are members of all kinds of different industry groups and businesses that are overestimating just how much people want to deal with this. And then, so here's some of the counter arguments. Gartner did a study. 7 out of 10 people still prefer a live agent when they have a complex issue, right? People are comfortable using self-service for transactional sales or FAQ type questions. And then Microsoft, they do a global state of customer service report, and this statistic is very telling. 86% of people expect that if they wanted to, they could call a company and get someone from that company on the phone. 86%. I don't think 86% of people believe we landed on the moon, like some of that was fake, but somebody's nodding like we didn't. But 86% want you to be able to call somebody and talk to them. Now think about this. if they expect to be able to do that, they probably expect for it to be easy, not too hard to do. And when folks like that NBA team remove the number from their website, there is not a phone number to call that organization on their website. So when you make it difficult, or once I call, it's a terrible experience, what's happening to the perception of your brand, right? We have, as marketers, put a lot of work into our digital ads, our digital presence, our logo, all the different elements that make up our brand, and we're gonna make it hard for someone to do what they expect to be able to do with us. That's not a good thing. Here's the great news. Because other people are doing that, it creates an excellent opportunity for your organization to do what others aren't. So, many inbound callers have already attempted self-service. That makes sense, right? Do you think anybody doesn't know, hey, I might be able to go online and get answers? No. So if they're calling, they've already thought of that. Callers could be frustrated. They could really feel like their issue's too important to handle on their own, so that's why they're calling. So brands who execute strong human service stand out, and a great caller experience as a slice of your customer experience can really differentiate your brand. And we're gonna talk a little bit later in the presentation about how to benchmark your competitors and find those areas where you can really stand out. So let's look at, again, marketing, what the marketing team needs to think about with the caller experience. All that work that you've put into your brand, what happens when someone calls? It's either gonna get reinforced, oh yeah, all those brand promises they made about who they are as a company, that's happening, or it's gonna get rendered moot. And why does that happen? Well, because the phones are IT's domain, and some of my best friends are IT people, don't get me wrong, but they think through a very operational lens. So it's de facto designed by ops and IT 90% of the time. And maybe that's what happened at your organization. So what we suggest is be a marketer and think of it through the eyes of your customer, right? What do we want that caller experience to be? If I was calling in, what do I care about? And those people that call, like any other segment of your audience, there's a couple of things you want to think about when you're trying to design your caller experience. One, who's calling, right? Is it all of our customers? Certainly callers skew older, but it's a myth that only people over 55 are making phone calls. Why are they calling, right? And if you know who they are and the different categories of reason that they call, you can understand where they're at in their buying cycle depending on what those reasons are. And in an earlier presentation, we talked a little bit about the buying cycle, but this is a little cheat sheet we use based on when we look at where someone is in their buying cycle when they're calling. Those are the stages in the middle. What are they looking to do likely, and what are the types of things we should do as marketers for each of those stages? I think it's safe to say that for someone to pick up a phone and call you, they're not any earlier in their stage than discovery, but they could be anywhere else during that, down that buying cycle. And when we talk about the caller journey as part of the caller experience, well, what is that? Well, just like you map out your customer journey, if you're doing a good job with your brand, you map out from the moment they become aware of you through that entire life cycle of being a customer, what's that like? We want to do the same thing with your caller journey. So the caller journey is what happens from the moment they hit that green button to the point they hang up, and then what are you doing after they get off the phone to make sure that they're having great experiences and you're staying in front of them. And really importantly as marketers, how are we taking advantage of the opportunities that a caller provides? This is a captive audience. They can't change the channel, they can't turn the volume down, and if we do it right, they're literally seconds or minutes away from a living, breathing human being that can help move them along that buying cycle path to maybe convert, retain, or increase wallet share. Because remember, that's what we're doing with caller experience marketing. We're not sending new customers your way, right? We're taking advantage of those that have already shown interest in your business to do one of those three things. So when we think about the caller journey, what's the first step in a caller journey? Well, it's gonna be what that caller hears when that first call is picked up. And that's whether it's a human, a recorded message of some kind, AI taking the call. Those first words really set the tone, right? What happens when they make that call, when they first run into your business over the phone? Now they're getting an idea very quickly of what to expect. And remember, callers, they're calling because they might be agitated in a hurry. So what can we do to reinforce a positive and on-brand experience? Well, one of the big things is make sure that it's consistent. When you think about your greeting as a marketer, instead of leaving it up to the IT guy or the front office or the business administrator to come up with this greeting, you need to understand that when we're, as human beings, we're trained that if we can expect the same thing over and over, there's a level of sophistication and competency that's going to be associated with your brand. And there's actually 5 other steps that you could have a whole other conversation of, that when you're building out a greeting, you need to be aware of. And if anybody wanted to talk through those one-on-one, I'm happy to do so. So then after they get that initial greeting, again, whatever it is, if it's a human being, great. Then you worry about how your CSR is interacting. But a lot of us at our organizations are going to use an auto attendant, IVR, some kind of natural language AI thing, where we're giving clients or our callers the opportunity to kind of find their way through. And there's some things that you want to consider if you are using an automated attendant or an IVR. One, voice, right? So as a marketer, if we're creating a video, whether it's a brand video, a video designed for conversion, for a digital ad, if we're doing streaming spots or television, we wouldn't just randomly pick a voice. We would make sure that that voice reflects our brand's personality. Are we fun? Are we a fun brand, carefree? Is our brand all about being knowledgeable and wisdom and having a wealth of information? Are we a nurturing brand that you want to show that you care about your customer and everything they care about? So you want to make sure that that reflects it. You want to take into consider when you're thinking about voice some things that are tied to how we're wired as human beings. We're all wired to listen more actively to members of the opposite sex. So if for some reason your call base skews male, then we would generally say you want to have a female voice and vice versa. However, we also have some biases as human beings, right? One of the great examples of this is senior care. We have a lot of clients in the senior care world, and if you go to a marketer, chief marketing officer at any senior care organization, and you say, hey, who's reaching out to you when it's time to look at something for mom and dad or time to look at something for a couple? They will tell you their number one persona is the oldest daughter in that family or the wife if it's a couple situation. So what that tells us is most of their callers are female. Well, based on what we just talked about, you'd think, well, you need a male voice. Well, let me ask you this. When you're looking to put a parent into a situation like this, what's the number one thing you're probably worried about? Are they going to be taken care of, right? And do we, as human beings, think of women as more nurturing or men as more nurturing? Women, right? So even though most of your callers are women and we listen more actively to men, in this case, we're going to tell our client, no, you should have a very nurturing female voice, because what they're saying is far less important in this case as how they're making you feel when you call in. And then the last thing to consider is that hierarchy of call options. Remember, this is probably set up by IT at some point or someone operationally, and they're very focused on what they want callers to do. Let me ask you this, show of hands. Who's been on a call, they called somewhere and it felt like forever. They were explaining to you that, hey, did you know you could go to our website or download our app and take care of this problem, get this fixed on your own? It's 2025. Everybody knows you have a website. Everybody knows they could probably find information there. Don't make people sit through that, right? Think of your customer. Why are people calling us? Well, make that the number one option for them. Help them get where they want to go. There's also some best practices, again, a long list of these as an example. For new accounts, press 3, where you're giving the thing that they're looking for, then the action item. Because let's say I'm calling for new accounts, I'm passively listening. Once I hear new accounts, if you've already told me what to press, I don't know, I wasn't paying attention a second ago. So there's things like this that as marketers that impact that caller experience and make us have that positive association with brand that we want to do. So if you have an auto attendant or IVR and you do all this right and you've done a really great job of making it so that it's easy for that caller to find their way on the caller journey, once they get through the IVR, all that has to happen now is they just got to wait to talk to that CSR, customer service rep, that's going to help them. So far, so good. And then they hear this.
All of our representatives are currently busy. Please stay on the line, and your call will be answered by the next available representative. All of our representatives are currently busy. Please stay on the line, and your call will be answered by the next available representative.
I think you get the idea. This goes on and on and on and on. Just saying that. And guess what? People are not going to hang up. They're going to sit through that. They're going to suffer through it. And why do they do that? Well, people that get put on hold or call and have to wait to talk to someone, they have extremely low expectations of what that's about to be like, right? In fact, they're probably bracing for it to be pretty terrible. The great thing is, when you successfully give someone low expectations, it's very easy to exceed those expectations. So anytime we're able to land like in anywhere in that shaded area of caller expectations, that's a win, right? That's a pretty target-rich environment there, pretty big space. So how do you do that? Well, we make the case that you do it by creating unique and custom experiences that have to engage the caller, inform the caller, and maybe even entertain, right? So why does unique and custom content matter for caller experience? I'm going to ask you, by a show of hands, who has heard this before? Show of hands, who's heard this? I assume it's everybody, right? I'm sure it has a name, and I bet I don't know it. But what this is, that is the default music for Cisco, which is a very popular phone system. And default music is a scourge on your caller experience. And why is that? Well, because that's ubiquitous, right? Many organizations use that music. Think about if someone's calling their health insurance company. They've had a hell of a time, their bill's wrong, they can't seem to get everything credited right. They're waiting for 30 seconds, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, listening to that music while they're agitated, they're not happy. We as human beings, we very strongly tie emotional memory to music. There's all kinds of studies on this, and I got stats galore to share with you on that. So what happens is they don't even think about it. They call your company. You want to give them great experiences. They start to hear that music, and without even knowing it, they're becoming agitated again. They're getting frustrated again because they experience something with somebody that has nothing to do with you, and because you're not using unique and custom content, you're opening yourself up to paying the consequences for someone else's failure. So what we suggest again is don't just make it unique and custom. I mean, you can do that, right? If you list all the things that you can do to help your clients with your services and what makes you special, that's unique, that's custom, and it's much better than default music. But if we want to engage them, maybe we find ways to entertain a little bit. And if I can get this one to work, this is something we created for a client that plays a little bit on the conversations around AI. Here we go. So here's an example of that.
Are you afraid of robots? Well, who isn't? They're creepy and their internal oils can leak on your couch and your pants. But it's time to get over our fears. So Walters Goodyear has hired a robot to answer our phones. Say hello to Vince.
Nice to meet you.
Vince, why don't you tell our friend about our $17.95 oil change?
It is an oil change that costs $17.95.
Well, of course, but mention that we also check the belts and hoses, top off all the fluids, check tire pressure.
You just did.
But that's what we hired you for.
Look, man, why are you hassling me?
We've got a few bugs to work out here.
The $17.95 oil change from Walters Goodyear. Temporarily robot.
All right. So humor's subjective, so I don't know if you may or may not have found that funny. But definitely, I can tell you this, if you get placed on hold and you hear that, you're actively listening and going, what in the world is this? You're engaged. And when you're engaged, what happens? The perceived amount of time that you're making your callers wait goes way down. You're not actually changing how long they're waiting, but because time flies when you're having fun or when you're distracted, it goes way down. Here's the thing to avoid. Repetition, though, because what happens is just the opposite. If you're making someone wait, earlier we listened to that message that said the same kind of generic stuff over and over. Studies show you're making your perceived wait time go way up because people are like, I have heard this 10,000 times. When are they going to pick up the phone, right? So as a marketer, take a look at what your caller experience is because you don't want that kind of feeling associated with your brand. A couple other things to consider. Music, just like voice, making sure that's aligned with your brand. What's the right genre for our brand, right? And also take a look at, do we have too many beats per minute and some other vagrancies that we can all talk one-on-one about if you want to really deep dive into it to make sure to have a great experience. We talked about voice in the auto attendant and IVR, same ideas. And then system limitations. This is where when we're talking to marketers, their eyes just start to glaze over. Because we're like, yeah, you have to worry about the kbps. Is that a ULAW wave file? And then they start to really tune out. So as marketers, if you want someone to help you with that, there's a whole bunch of people in this room that you could talk to that will have those fun conversations with IT about your system limitations. All right. So you fix this now. You're doing a great job as a marketer. You've gone back to your organization. You've got your auto attendant. Perfect. People are loving it. Your hold experience, outstanding, unique, custom content. They're about to now run into what we hope is a living, breathing, problem-solving human being. Before we talk about the CSR, just a show of hands in here. Who in here either gives the entire or a partial copy of their brand standards guide to their CSRs, their frontline phone staff? Nope, your brand standards guide. I see a couple of hands, which is good. If you're not doing that, consider doing it. And why would we do that? Why would we give our brand standards to a CSR? Well, your CSR team, they serve as de facto brand ambassadors every time someone calls. Think about it. They may be the only human being that someone interacts with related to your brand. So why wouldn't we want our CSRs to know all the adjectives and descriptive things that we would give to any ad agency that's supposed to be working on our brand? You want them to know how you want your brand talked about. More importantly, possibly, you want them to know how you don't want your brand talked about. And if they're not armed with that information and updated when it gets updated and trained regularly, they can't do that. Click. So again, they should absolutely understand your key phrases, right? Taglines, all the things that you want to convey to callers, it's going to help them out. So let's say as a marketer, you do this. Man, you are creating a marketing-centric caller experience. You're doing a great job. You've done all this work. Well, how do you know if the people that are talking to your customers are doing all the things you want them to know? The most straightforward way to do that is by auditing their calls. And you can do that with listening to actual calls, designing certain scenarios that you want to see, how your team responds through Secret Shopper. You can do this manually. Jesse, I don't know where you're at, but I was talking to Jesse yesterday. He shared with our team all of the AI options where now, and it's been around for a little while, but it's great as it's scaling for even smaller businesses. You can just plug this AI bot on the back of your phone and say, hey, I want to make sure they're using these phrases when they talk about the brand. I want to make sure when the call is ending, they say this specific thing. And instead of having to have a human being listen to a very small percentage of your calls, AI will transcribe and catch and give you a score. Hey, out of your 20,000 calls this month, this only happened 32% of the time. And here's the reps who did it, and here's the reps who didn't do it. So you're able to know who's doing a good job representing your brand pretty in depth. And then, by the way, if you're going to do this, if you're going to take the initiative from the marketing side of the house to say, hey, we want to make sure these things are happening, whoever's doing that mystery calling, have them call your competitors, who you see as your competition, and find out what their experience is like. And what you'll find, hopefully, is that they suck, and you have a real opportunity to differentiate your brand. Or you might find, holy cow, they're eating our lunch. Man, if I knew that what it was going to be like to call us and call the other guys, I'd be calling the other guys. And that's not good, but then you're aware of it and you can make adjustments. Speaking of which, how do you make adjustments? Well, we recommend when our callers go through a caller experience auditing process to develop KPIs based on where you're falling down and are not doing a good job representing the brand so that you can measure them. And then in some way, whether a carrot or a stick, incentivizing your CSR teams to make sure they're hitting those KPIs. A very brief example, we did a call audit for a company out of North Carolina recently, and it was shocking what they would say. This company told us up and down how customer service focused they were. They preach it, they live it, they breathe it. And then you would call and you'd say, yeah, hi, I've never done business with you before. I'd like to place an order. And they would literally say, what's your customer number? That's the first thing out of their mouth. Well, I just told you I've never done business with you before. And even if I had, you don't say, oh, great, hi, nice to meet you. None of that stuff. It was terrible, and it was happening over and over again. So the perception was, hey, our sales are doing okay. We must be providing awesome on-brand experiences, and they weren't, and so we helped them implement these KPIs. Again, obviously, you'd have to have staff internally to do that training, or you could go outside to have folks help you do that training. And by elevating that caller experience, right? So let's say you do that benchmarking, and you're talking to you're benchmarking 2 or 3 competitors, and you realize they do stink. And man, we have a real good opportunity to own a bit of the market here, that segment that wants that human touch to call. If every time they call you, it's consistent, it's on brand, and you're doing the things you're supposed to do, and it's not like that with them, well, when your competitor comes knocking with a 20% discount offer, something like that, you've done a really good job of making someone go, yeah, they could save me money, but these guys, they just cover they CYA, so I'm going to stay with them. So it's a really great opportunity to differentiate and insulate. So with that said, that's kind of it. As a recap, what are we trying to do as marketers with our caller experience marketing? Convert, retain, grow wallet share. Don't leave this up to operations and IT. They probably won't give you the whole reins to the back end of the system, and you don't want that anyway. But talk to them and say, hey, we need to take a look at our caller experience from a brand standpoint. If you have any questions about this, we have tons of resources at our website. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of EMA members here that have a lot of knowledge on this, so you can feel free to talk to them or to me. All right, thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.